Morgan Freeman's appearance on Piers Morgan's show was expected to be a calm, insightful interview, a moment for the audience to hear the actor's wisdom and reflections on his long and storied career. Fans anticipated an evening of thoughtful conversation, anecdotes from iconic films, and perhaps some gentle humor characteristic of Freeman's public persona. From the very start, the show seemed to follow that anticipated pattern. Piers Morgan greeted Freeman warmly, praising his decades of contributions to cinema and highlighting his reputation not only as a consummate actor but also as someone whose voice carried significant influence in cultural and social discussions. Freeman, in turn, responded with his usual calm, measured tone, giving concise yet deeply meaningful answers that reflected his life experience and careful thought. At that stage, nothing in the exchange suggested that the interview would take an abrupt, dramatic turn. The tension began subtly, almost imperceptibly, when Piers transitioned from discussing Freeman's filmography to broader social issues, particularly the role of celebrities in political and social discourse. Piers asked a provocative question, implying that actors in Hollywood were increasingly vocal about political matters, and suggested that perhaps such engagement could be excessive or misplaced. Freeman's response was deliberate and firm, asserting that artists have historically used their platforms to address issues of importance and that expecting them to remain silent would be both unreasonable and counterproductive. His calm, steady delivery contrasted sharply with the increasingly insistent tone of Piers, who seemed intent on challenging Freeman's perspective. As Piers pressed further, questioning whether actors should refrain from expressing political opinions, the first signs of genuine tension became visible. Freeman's measured composure remained, but his eyes narrowed slightly, signaling that he was prepared to defend his stance with clarity and authority. The pivotal moment came when Piers suggested that Freeman, given his esteemed reputation, should set an example by remaining neutral on social issues. Freeman's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, a raised eyebrow, a slight pause, and a controlled but unmistakable shift in tone. Leaning forward, he stated firmly that no one, not even Piers Morgan, had the right to dictate what he could or could not speak about. The studio fell silent as the weight of his words settled over everyone present. The contrast between Piers' agitated energy and Freeman's calm intensity created a palpable tension, one that seemed to electrify the atmosphere. Attempting to diffuse the situation, Piers tried to inject humor, but Freeman's demeanor made it clear that he was not in the mood for levity. He continued, emphasizing that conversations should be genuinely open and not controlled by a narrow agenda, noting that the type of questioning being pursued was exactly the kind of manipulation that frustrated the public. As the exchange escalated, the live studio environment became increasingly tense. Piers attempted to regain control by insisting that he was merely asking questions, but Freeman, uncharacteristically sharp, interrupted him and maintained that the discussion could not proceed under those terms. Behind the scenes, producers were scrambling, realizing that the situation was moving quickly toward an unprecedented confrontation. Freeman, demonstrating both resolve and dignity, ultimately removed his microphone, stood up, and declared that if the conversation was going to continue in that confrontational manner, he would leave. Piers tried to persuade him to stay, but Freeman shook his head and walked off the set. The cameras followed him briefly, before cutting back to Piers, who sat frozen, the weight of the moment visibly impacting him. Silence enveloped the studio, a rare moment of vulnerability for a host known for his confidence and assertiveness. The reaction was instantaneous. Social media exploded as clips of Freeman walking off circulated widely, garnering millions of views within hours. Fans expressed shock, admiration, and support for Freeman's principled stand. Discussions erupted across platforms, debating the dynamics of the confrontation, the responsibilities of public figures, and the conduct of Piers Morgan. Commentators and viewers alike described the incident as one of the most memorable television moments of the year, emphasizing the rarity of seeing someone as composed as Morgan Freeman react so decisively. By the end of the broadcast, the original purpose of the interview, an exploration of Freeman's career, had been entirely overshadowed by the dramatic clash, leaving a lasting impression on both fans and critics. Freeman's departure underscored his commitment to authenticity and integrity, a reminder that even in moments of tension, one's principles and voice must remain unshaken. Morgan Freeman's scheduled interview on Piers Morgan's show was meant to be a highlight for viewers, a rare opportunity to hear from one of Hollywood's most respected actors. Known for his calm demeanor, eloquence, and the gravitas of his voice, Freeman was expected to bring wisdom, charm, and insight to the live broadcast. From the opening moments, the interaction appeared to be unfolding smoothly. Piers Morgan greeted Freeman with his trademark intensity, praising his decades-long career, the breadth of his work, and his iconic presence in both film and public life. Freeman responded in his typically measured, thoughtful manner, offering concise but meaningful reflections on his roles, career milestones, and the personal philosophies that had guided him. For the first several minutes, everything suggested a respectful, engaging dialogue, a meeting of two strong personalities in a professional, controlled setting. The shift toward tension began when Piers decided to steer the conversation beyond Freeman's illustrious film career into broader social commentary. The host raised a pointed question regarding Hollywood actors and their increasing involvement in political and social debates. Piers suggested that some actors might be overstepping by sharing opinions on sensitive matters, implying that celebrity voices could be disproportionate or inappropriate in shaping public discourse. Freeman, with his trademark calm, responded firmly. He stated that artists have historically played an important role in raising awareness and inspiring change, and that expecting them to remain silent was both unrealistic and dismissive of their societal influence. His measured response, poised and articulate, contrasted sharply with Piers' more insistent and confrontational style. As Piers pressed the point further, asking whether Freeman himself believed in restraint or neutrality, the tension in the studio began to rise noticeably. The critical turning point came when Piers asserted that Freeman, due to his stature and influence, should act as a model of neutrality and refrain from speaking out. Freeman's reaction was subtle at first, a slight pause, a quiet intake of breath, a raised eyebrow, but it was unmistakable to anyone familiar with his composure. He leaned forward and calmly, but firmly, stated that no one, not even Piers Morgan, had the authority to tell him what he could or could not say. His words carried weight, not through volume but through the steady conviction in his voice. The audience, both in the studio and at home, could sense the intensity of the moment. The contrast between Piers' increasingly aggressive questioning and Freeman's unwavering calm created an electrifying tension that few expected on live television. Piers attempted to lighten the mood with humor, but Freeman was resolute, emphasizing that what was happening was a form of manipulation rather than genuine inquiry. He explained that meaningful conversation requires openness and honesty, and that trying to control or confine what a guest could express went against the principles of fair dialogue. The audience reacted audibly, some gasping, others murmuring in agreement, while the tension between host and guest became increasingly palpable. Piers continued to press, raising his voice and insisting he was merely asking questions, but Freeman, for the first time showing visible frustration, interrupted him, reiterating that he would not participate under such conditions. The situation reached its climax when Freeman removed his microphone and stood up, stating clearly that he would leave the show if the conversation continued in the confrontational manner that had emerged. Piers attempted to persuade him to stay, but Freeman shook his head and walked off the set. The camera briefly followed him before cutting back to Piers, who was momentarily speechless, a rare sight for a host known for his assertiveness and confidence. The studio was left in stunned silence, the gravity of the moment palpable to everyone present. The aftermath was immediate and widespread. Clips of Freeman walking off circulated rapidly on social media, generating millions of views within hours. Fans expressed shock, admiration, and overwhelming support for Freeman's principled stand. Discussions erupted online and in media outlets, debating the dynamics of the confrontation, the role of celebrities in public discourse, and Piers Morgan's conduct as a host. Analysts described the moment as one of the most intense and memorable television clashes in recent memory, noting the rarity of seeing someone as composed as Morgan Freeman assert himself so decisively. By the end of the broadcast, the focus of the interview had shifted completely from Freeman's career to the dramatic clash, leaving a lasting impression on viewers. The incident highlighted Freeman's unwavering commitment to integrity and authenticity, proving that even in the face of pressure, he would stand by his principles and speak his truth. Morgan Freeman's appearance on Piers Morgan's show was widely anticipated, with fans expecting a relaxed, insightful conversation that would highlight Freeman's career achievements, his personal reflections, and the wisdom he has accumulated over decades in Hollywood. Freeman is renowned not only for his iconic performances but also for the calm authority and thoughtful intelligence he brings to interviews. Initially, the show unfolded as expected. Piers Morgan welcomed Freeman enthusiastically, praising his distinguished career, his influence in the entertainment industry, and his ability to connect with audiences across generations. Freeman responded with his trademark composure, offering deliberate, measured answers that combined insight, humility, and a subtle touch of humor. For several minutes, the interaction appeared professional and cordial, with no indication that the calm atmosphere would soon be shattered. The first signs of tension emerged when Piers shifted the conversation from Freeman's cinematic accomplishments to more provocative topics. He asked pointed questions about the involvement of Hollywood figures in political and social debates, implying that some actors might overstep their boundaries by publicly expressing opinions on controversial matters. Freeman responded thoughtfully, asserting that artists have always used their platforms to speak on issues that matter and that silencing or discouraging them would be both unrealistic and counterproductive. His calm, authoritative tone stood in sharp contrast to Piers' increasingly insistent questioning, which became more aggressive as he pressed Freeman for a response that would align with his own perspective. The dynamic in the studio began to change, with a sense of tension building in the room as viewers could sense that Freeman was unwilling to be provoked, yet Piers continued to challenge him. The situation escalated when Piers suggested that Freeman, because of his public stature and influence, should remain neutral and refrain from commenting on controversial issues. Freeman's reaction, while subtle, was unmistakable. He paused briefly, leaned slightly forward, and spoke in a steady, controlled voice, making it clear that no one, not even Piers Morgan, had the authority to dictate what he could or could not express. The intensity of his response stunned the studio and viewers alike. Freeman's calm but firm demeanor contrasted sharply with Piers' increasingly agitated tone, creating a palpable tension that seemed to hang in the air. The moment was charged, the contrast between the host's provocation and the guest's composed assertiveness making the exchange compelling and unpredictable. Piers attempted to inject humor to diffuse the tension, but Freeman was unwavering. He articulated that open, meaningful conversation cannot exist if one party is attempting to control or manipulate the dialogue, emphasizing that the type of questioning being pursued was exactly the kind of constraining behavior that discourages honest discourse. The audience reacted audibly, with murmurs and gasps reflecting the shock and admiration many felt for Freeman's principled stance. Piers tried to regain control by asserting that he was simply asking questions, but Freeman interrupted him, calmly but firmly indicating that he would not continue under those conditions. The confrontation reached a breaking point when Freeman removed his microphone, stood, and announced that he would leave if the conversation persisted in that confrontational manner. Despite Piers' attempts to persuade him to stay, Freeman walked off the set, his departure both dignified and decisive. The reaction to Freeman's exit was immediate and widespread. Clips of the moment circulated rapidly on social media, quickly accumulating millions of views. Fans expressed a mixture of shock, admiration, and support, praising Freeman for standing firm and refusing to be coerced. Analysts and commentators weighed in, debating the dynamics of the confrontation, the responsibilities of public figures, and the role of the host in such exchanges. The incident became a focal point of conversation across platforms, with many declaring it one of the most memorable television moments of the year. By the end of the episode, the original intent of the interview, to discuss Freeman's career and achievements, had been overshadowed entirely by the dramatic clash. Freeman's walk-off served as a striking reminder of his commitment to integrity and authenticity, demonstrating that even under pressure, he would remain true to his principles and speak his truth without compromise.